Hi there, my name is Nicole Young and I'm here to help you learn more about photography and post-processing. This video is part 2 on how to add a signature watermark using ON1 Photo RAW. If you'd like to learn how I got to this point, you'll want to watch that other video and I have it listed in the description. I got a few questions after sharing that tutorial, and so I thought I would address them in a separate video. The first question was, what if you want to change the color of your signature? So I'm going to show that first. And then I got another question that asked about adding the same signature to multiple photos. So I'm going to share how you can do that in the second half of this tutorial. So let's go ahead and change the color of the signature. Over in the layers panel, I have my two layers. I have my image file at the bottom, and then I have the signature layer at the top. With that signature layer active, I'm going to make sure that I have that local adjustment setting active as well. Then I'll click Add Adjustment. Next, what I want to do is mask this so that only the signature portion is visible. Right now I'm using a blending mode to control what is actually visible on that layer, but if I tried to add color to the entire layer, then I would start seeing some of that color seep through in the transparency. So I'm going to click on this little icon here, which brings up the masking settings, and I'm going to press 2 of these buttons. First, I'm going to click this lumen button, which adds a luminosity mask. Then I'm going to click invert. Now it looks like I'm basically just back to where I was, and it looks like nothing happened. But if I were to view this mask, I can now see that I actually have a mask here. And what's happening is that black area is hiding that portion of the layer, and the white area is my actual signature coming through. So in essence, I've masked this entire layer so that only the black portion of the layer is actually visible now. Next, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of this adjustment panel and toggle the paint with color option. As soon as I do that, the default color is applied. I didn't have to do any brushing for this because the layer is already masked, and when you use the paint with color, when you do any brushing on your image, all you're really doing is just creating a mask. So then to change the color of this layer, I would simply click on that little color swatch, and then I would choose a color in whichever way I would like. Now let's go ahead and walk through the steps of using this signature watermark on multiple photos. Now, in essence, what I'm going to do here is create a preset. For this example, I'm going to use a standard horizontal photograph. If you are doing this at home and you'd like to create this effect to work on multiple types of images, you'll probably need to create 2 or 3 of these presets. So you'll create one horizontal, and then you'll also create a vertical and maybe even a square format. It really depends on the standard aspect ratios that you tend to work with most often. And this will make a little bit more sense once I get to the end of this tutorial so you can actually see why this is important. So here I have my watermark set up once again. In the layers panel, you can see I have that signature layer on top, and I have just a simple horizontal image at the bottom. For this setup photo, it doesn't matter what photo you use. However, I would recommend using something with a fairly high resolution. I also want to make sure that I position the watermark in kind of a standard location on the image. So for this example, I'm just going to place it in the bottom right corner. You also may want to size it appropriately. There might be a little bit of trial and error involved with this. Once you kind of create the first one, you'll kind of understand what I mean. Okay, so let's go back to that layers panel, and I want to make sure that I have that very bottom layer active. Then I'm going to go into the local adjustments, and my goal here is to make the entire image white. So it's pretty much just a white background layer. In ON1 Photo, you can't create new blank canvases. You always have to start with an image. So this is just a workaround to get to that white base image. So I'm going to click on the little mask next to the adjustment, and that brings up my masking controls. And I'm just going to click invert. So when I did that, it made a little bit of a change, and that's because down here in the settings, this exposure is always at -1 once you set an adjustment. You can always just reset that if you want to start from scratch. But for this example, I'm not going to really play with any of these settings. I'm going to go down all the way to the bottom and click on Paint with Color. And that fills the entire image with that color. I'd like this to be white, so I'm going to click on that little swatch, and I'm going to find that white swatch. And now I have a very simple white image with my watermark on the bottom right. Next, I need to export this as a JPEG. So in the bottom right, I'm going to click Export. I'm going to make sure that file type is set to JPEG at the highest quality. I'll choose my folder location, and I'm also going to rename this. So I will just name this Nicole Z Horizontal. I'm also not going to make changes to any of the other settings, and then I'll click Export Now. Okay, so my file has been exported. The next step is to turn this newly exported JPEG file into a texture. So I'm going to go up to File, Manage Extras. I'm going to go over to Textures and click Import. There's that JPEG file that I just exported. I'll go ahead and click Open. And now I need to select or add a new category. So I'll call this one Signature, and then click OK. So there's my new texture signature that I just imported. I'll go ahead and click Close. Now let's open up a new photograph and let's see how this works. I have a new photo opened up into ON1. Let's go ahead and add that new signature texture to see how it looks. I have the effects panel open, and I'm going to click Add Filter and select Textures. Then in the category dropdown, I'm going to scroll down until I find that signature category. I already have that texture selected because it's the only one in that category. And then I'm going to change that mode down to darker. And that's really all you have to do to add that texture signature layer to a new image. Now, another thing you may want to do is save this so you can apply it very quickly to other images. And to do that, you'll want to save it as a preset. You'll want to create this preset when you don't have any other effects added to your image. So in this case, the only effect applied here is the textures filter. So then I'll click on this little icon right here to save a preset. I'm going to make sure that only those effect settings are saved to this preset. And then I will call this Nicole Z Horizontal. And then just create a new category and click OK. Now, the only thing about doing it with this method is that you don't have a lot of control where the signature is going to be. The most you can really do is use the scale slider, but that's just going to kind of push it out further towards that corner, and then eventually it's going to go off the edge. You can't really resize it or move it up or down. And this horizontal version is not really going to work very well or at all with other types of aspect ratios. So I'm going to jump over to Browse, and I'm going to choose a different photo, and then I'll go ahead and click Edit. And this time I chose a vertical image. I'll click on Effects so we can see what's happening there in the Effects panel. And then I'm going to make sure that I can see those presets on the left. I already have that category open, and I'm going to click on that new preset that I just created. So you can see my signature is there on the left. It looks pixelated, but if I zoom in, everything is fine. For some reason, it's just previewing it that way. But the problem here is that the signature is just not showing up where I want it to. Now you can play around with the settings inside of the textures. On the very bottom left, you can rotate it and see if you can get it to the right spot, but it's just not going to work because I created this preset using a horizontal image, and so therefore it really is only going to work well with other horizontal photographs. So if I wanted to make sure I had something that worked kind of globally across all of my images, I would also recreate those steps to creating the texture and the preset using a vertical oriented photograph. So you just may need to do that a few times, maybe even create a square or an 8:10 ratio a 16:9 ratio. It really just depends on the types of photographs that you tend to create most often. I really hope this training was useful for you and was a nice kind of a bonus add-on to the previous video about creating and adding a signature watermark in ON1 Photo RAW. If you guys like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I'll be sharing a lot more like it down the road.